Alright, this is the hybrid build from Southern Custom CC. So $300 to $325 is his target price for the complete base kit. That should come with a basic exhaust and a basic carburetor, and then of course all the hardware to mount it to a bike, just like the Phantom did. And here's the Phantom. In case you're wondering, she's still running fine. We just got to put it on another bike. He's trying to compete with the Phantom as far as I can tell, and seeing that the Phantom is not in stock and hasn't been in stock for months, that shouldn't be too hard to do, if I'm completely honest. Okay, if this launches at the target price of $300 to $325 as a complete kit and stays at that price, this will probably be a go-to motor for a lot of people. But I'm saying probably simply because we were disappointed with the Phantom, and now we have to wait for its revamp to come out. So all this is just to be taken with a grain of salt until these motors actually hit the market and have proven themselves reliable. Now, I have very limited experience with Minarellis, and when you know we're working on one right now from DLH Performance on the F-Zero, and I haven't even got it tuned yet, so I don't really know what they're fully capable of, but the small amount of riding I've done on the stock Minarelli cylinder with the F-Zero tells me that these are a massive improvement in performance over a China doll. It's not even a competition. The amount of power that these things have in the entire RPM range is night and day difference. So I don't have any doubts that this is going to be a strong performance motor, just like the Phantom. However, this should have some additional benefits which would make it more tempting, in my opinion, than the Phantom. Unfortunately, we are missing out on one of the biggest benefits about having a complete kit, and that's the exhaust. Now, his kits are going to ship with basic exhaust, kind of like the Phantom has, the upgraded version. It's not a pipe, it's just an exhaust. That's what they're going to ship with on the base kits. But apparently there are also adapted MZ65s that bolt right up to these, and they're meant to fit on a general amount of frames. I have ordered one of those, but until it shows up, I can't actually test this motor. But that's the only thing this is waiting on before we put it on a bike. There also will be the upgraded version of this kit, from what I'm led to believe, that will come with an upgraded carburetor and an MZ65 pipe. Pre-adapted, of course. All plug and play, no welding required. I'm not sure what carburetor he's going to use yet. I know right now he's using the PZ20 as a placeholder. One of these. These are just $20 carburetors. They're nothing fancy. I don't particularly care for the PZ20 or the 22 simply because you can't find pilot jets for these anywhere. At least not as far as I can tell. I asked him about that too, and from what I understand is he's just using it as a placeholder until he can get a VM style carburetor. Now, will it be a real VM? I don't know. Those are pretty expensive, but even if it's just a VM style carburetor, that should be better than the PZ20s because those are easier to get jets for, as far as I can tell. But I figure while we're waiting for that pipe, I can go ahead and break this down and examine it to see what the build quality is. I will admit that I'm a bit skeptical about his target price range for this motor being sustainable, simply because of the amount of upgrades that this motor has in it over something like the Phantom at the same price point. It doesn't seem like there could be much of a profit there. But if he's got it figured out, then more power to him, because the things inside this motor are pretty appealing, and there aren't very many downsides that I can see. And as we start to take it apart, I will say one downside right away. You'll notice I'm using a 10mm on these head bolts. That's because this has 6mm cylinder studs. Now, that's not necessarily terrible, but they are going to be easier to damage, strip out, snap off. Just keep that in mind. As far as I can tell, this is a bone stock Minarelli head and cylinder. Aluminum head gasket. It's pretty thin too. If you've never had a Minarelli before and you end up picking up a kit like this, one thing you're going to notice right away is they're a lot heavier than a China doll. And that is because this entire cylinder is iron. A bit of scuffing inside the cylinder. Not gouging, just scuffing. Nothing that's going to hurt it. Now this is bone stock, so there's no port work on this cylinder whatsoever. And what I noticed is what a lot of guys do with these hybrid builds is they port the skirt, at the very least, right here. They bring this down, which helps with airflow on the adapter plate. Now I did not do this with my first Minarelli build. It's running bone stock, no port work on the skirt, but they'll usually open this up quite a bit right here. Not completely necessary, because when the window is opening in the intake port, there's ample airflow, so if you don't do that, it's still going to run just fine. Here is our adapter plate. I am curious. So here we have the adapter plate for the Southern Customs Hybrid. You can see it's got the smaller 6mm mounting holes. Okay, and right here we have an adapter plate from DLH Performance that came with this ported cylinder. And right away I notice that the profile of the porting, or the cuts, is a little bit different. This one appears to contour more towards the stock transfers on this bottom end, which is going to be a basic Zeta bottom end, a Zeta 80. This one seems to be opened up a little bit more for better flow. Either way, neither one of these match up perfectly to a Zeta 80 bottom end. I am obligated to point out that the adapter plate's milling work and machining is a lot cleaner than the one from DLH. You can see that the Southern Customs adapter plate has all smooth machine work. The DLH looks more like it was done by hand. Alright. So this intake appears to adapt the stock Minarelli reeds to a PZ19, 20, or 22 carburetor. I'm going to open this up because I've never actually seen inside one of these. G2s come stock with carbon fiber reeds. I don't particularly care for the carbon fiber reeds, mainly just because they don't always sit perfect on the G2 cage and seal. That might be the case with some of the stainless steel ones, but these ones are definitely flush up against the cage. So Mark explained to me that because the price point of this kit is going to be so low, that just like with any other China doll, you would want to examine the kits, clean them if necessary. So with that in mind, at this price point, I really can't complain about that. Some of you might not like it, but it's just a thing pretty much with every motor you get in the budget category. You need to examine them, and you need to clean them if necessary. Personally, I see that some of these ports are not very clean. They have real jagged, sharp edges. So I'm probably going to go through with a light sanding wheel and clean up the edge of some of these ports. Yeah, there's nothing ugly, just a bit of, say, casting flakes on the edge of the transfer ports. These basic Minarellis, they are 47mm, so the same size piston as a China doll, just a much better port map in the cylinder, which is why they get so much more performance. I'm not sure what to expect putting a basic exhaust system on this without a pipe. I have no idea how the Minarellis perform without an actual pipe, so I'll be very curious to see what people get out of these stock kits. No grease on the clutch cam. Well, that's pretty common on budget motors. There is grease on the bucking bar and down here where the bucking bar bearing will be. This is that upgraded Magneto that he talks about in his video. Supposedly this gives more current. Now I can see the red magnets inside here. Supposedly this is supposed to be able to handle higher RPMs and just hold together stronger. The gap is a bit wide between the magnet and the stators. These studs are a little loose. Alright, there is no grease on these bevel gears. Yet another common occurrence in budget motors. So even the hybrids aren't going to get away from what we have to deal with on most of these. The seal on the magnet side, by surprise, actually does not look damaged. It is not seated fully though on one side, so I'm going to take a socket and I'm going to push this back down a little bit so it's flush with the case. We'll find out for sure when we take the bevel gear off, but the seal on this side of the case looks good. I hate that they do this. I absolutely hate that they put these things on so damn tight. Oh, it just ate. It just ate the washer. Oh, that was stupid. Should have used a penny. That one didn't want to come out at all. I get why they put thread locker on these, because these are known to occasionally rattle out and eat into the clutch cover, among other problems. Whatever they use, it's just too much. In case anyone's wondering, I'm not taking this motor apart because I think I have to. I'm taking it apart because I just want to see what's inside, how well it's put together. I don't recommend fully disassembling a brand new motor because in a lot of cases you're going to create more problems than you would have by just cleaning it, taking the top end off, examining it. But if you break the whole thing apart, then you really you can open up a can of worms. So I'm doing this because I want to see the inside of this kit. There's a lot of key features in here that I'm really curious about on the inside, but this isn't something that I would recommend doing with a new motor, especially if you're inexperienced. For the most part, I just take off the head, I clean up any casting flakes if I find them, and I'll put a bit of gas in the motor, slosh it around, cycle the crank a bunch of times to help rinse out any debris inside the case, and then dump it. Obviously you do this outside with a water hose nearby, because gas, in case you didn't know, is very flammable. But cleaning debris out of your case can save your motor in the long run. All that stuff works its way into the bearings, into the cylinder, and just creates problems, and these motors are so dirty nowadays. Now this one does not appear to have any junk. I don't see anything. Usually you'll see bits of metal on the crank, but that might be because this is a review sample that's been examined several times, possibly taken apart. But I don't actually think he took this one apart himself, simply because of this. We do have the single ear wrist pin clips. There is grease on the needle bearing. This is a ZL 40mm rod. Bearing feels perfect. Bearing feels perfect. I don't know how much of a big deal this is because these are shielded bearings, not sealed bearings. But from what I understand is you don't want a seal or a shield on the crank bearings because it reduces how much oil from the gas mix can get in there and keep these lubricated. Now these are going to be greased from the factory, but as hot as it's going to get inside this motor, that grease might work its way out. So I can't say one way or another whether this is good or bad, but personally when I install crank bearings, I make sure that there are no shields or seals on either side of the bearing. Let me know in the comments if you know more about this than I do, whether or not this really matters, okay? I can see tiny little aluminum flakes rubbed off on my finger. I don't think you guys will be able to see it. So, a little dirty, but there's no big chunks in here like you usually see on a lot of these bottom ends. Rinsing out the motor before you run it will get rid of most of these, and that can save your engine in the long run. On this motor, it probably doesn't really matter because that's an iron cylinder, and these aluminum flakes aren't going to really do anything to that cylinder, but they can work their way into the bearings. Anyways, rinse your case, rinse all your cases, doesn't matter what motor you get. This isn't going to be isolated to this engine, and quite honestly, this is actually pretty clean compared to what I've seen on a lot of kits. Our pre-balanced crank, an actual balanced crank. So I'm curious to see how smooth this motor is going to run with this style of setup. I have absolutely no idea. Yeah, crank weight is pretty wobbly. So the crank might be balanced, but these weights are definitely not true. It is an SKF bearing. SKF Explorer 6202-2Z/C3. Alright, I don't really know what a good ring-in gap for these 47mm cylinders is, but the closest I got on my feeler gauge set is 0.305 millimeters. Now, I did measure the squish gap when I first got this motor. 1.7 millimeters of squish gap. It's a bit on the wide side. It should still run fine, but I would have liked to get it just below 1 millimeter. Alright, now on to the obvious negatives I see about this kit. 6mm cylinder studs is not something that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy dealing with, so you're going to need to be real careful. Second, these crank weights got a lot of wobble in them. The balance might compensate for that, but they did not get treated nicely at the factory. Alright, now on to the things you expect to see on modern kits. You've got 8mm mounting studs with the wider mounting points. You've got a 40mm stroke. So basically all the things that I like about Firestorm Zeta 80 is included in this kit. Now let's get on to the positives. There's quite a few here actually for the price point, or at least the targeted price point of this kit. If it does drop for about $325, these are things that I'm actually pretty impressed with at that price point. Here's the magnet from the Southern Customs Hybrid. This is the magnet out of our original Phantom 85. I'm going to try and pick up the cylinder with the Phantom 85 magnet. Okay, we'll try again. Alright, so this is just to give you a reference point. This is the magnet from the Southern Customs kit. It's definitely a stronger magnet. Alright. Dang. So he's not lying about the magnet. It is stronger. Because they were honest about the magnet, I am going to believe them about the upgraded Magneto. They were also truthful about the SKF bearings, or at the very least these are marked SKF. We won't know how effective these balancing holes are until we run the motor, but the simple fact that they come with a pre-balanced crank is kind of a big deal. And then of course the fact that you've got a Minarelli cylinders, which have proven themselves time and time again for many builders to be powerful and versatile motors, with a pretty strong upgrade path as well. The machining on the adapter plate is very clean. The preload spring on the clutch is massive. This is a beefy spring, so you should have reduced clutch slipping issues, which is going to be important because once you put a pipe on these Minarellis, as soon as they hit that power band, they're known to slip stock clutches. So this should help pretty much as you can get out of a stock clutch. And then the simple fact that they come with pre-adapted intakes, and your kit will come with a pre-adapted exhaust. So for that price point, all those positives really add up to something that might be the actual game changer that the Phantom 85 was supposed to be. So that's pretty much it. There's your detailed breakdown of the Southern Custom CC's hybrid motor. Really looking forward to seeing the full kits available and what other builders are going to be able to do with these. Alright guys, I hope you got some useful information out of this little breakdown video. And until next time, ride safe.